I developed an approach to connecting with people. This way that I have found in connecting has brought me so much joy, peace, and purpose, and I'd love to share it with you today. Are you ready? All right. It's when you live your life with your full intention, you become connected to everyone and everything. All right. Who loves their coffee? I even see a coffee right there. Every day I start my day going to my favorite coffee shop and getting my coffee. I walk in the coffee shop, I connect with all these local musicians and artists, and of course Alexis, my barista. One day after I ordered my coffee, she followed me around the register and walked outside to ask me a question. There had been a girl that had been coming into the coffee shop who was in trouble. She looked homeless, maybe abused, maybe a young foster girl. And Alexis asked me, is there a phone number or an agency that we can call that can help this girl? Well, now, I've been going to get my coffee every day at this coffee house for many years, so I knew a little bit about Alexis. I knew that she had overcome some incredible hardships in her life. I knew that Alexis had overcome homelessness. Hardship recognizes hardship in others, yeah? So I told Alexis, you know what? The best thing you can do, and what I suggest, is that you tell her your story. And she kind of looked at me like, what? And I said, just tell her your story. Tell her what you overcame. Because helping people is incredibly complex. There's no straight line. There's no like one size fits all, right? It's more, in my experience, about connecting through human connection, human experience that inspires hope, which is what we need. Sometimes our cities need some hope, and they need a new pathway for change. About 3 years ago, I noticed that my home city of San Diego had become more like a war zone than America's finest city. After the city allowed the removal of 10,000 affordable housing units, thousands of people were forced to live in the street. To make way for luxury condos and unaffordable market rate housing, overnight people became criminalized and dehumanized. It broke my heart. So I took to the streets with my guitar and a desire to connect with my unsheltered neighbors. I'd bring bottles of water, food. I'd walk down the street where there were different encampments in canyons. A lot of times I was met with suspicion. They'd be like, well, who are you? I was like, I'm Steph. And then the next question was, well, who are you with? I said, I'm not with anybody. I'm alone, I'm with me, I'm a musician. This opened up a completely new line of communication between us. We connected as artists. I met poets, filmmakers, writers, musicians. They'd almost immediately kind of break into smiling and laughing and talking about what they loved and talked about their projects. Sometimes we break into song right on the spot. So one day when I was doing outreach, I ran into a group of people that I knew that were living unsheltered on the street. And next door to them was a gentleman in a tent, and I leaned down and I introduced myself. He was very nice, invited me into his tent, gave me a pillow cushion to sit on. Being invited into anybody's home is a very sacred space, right? So I was really grateful he invited me in that day. We started talking about his journey and how he had no hope, and he really didn't feel like he could have any hope. It didn't matter. I said, let's revolt. Let's march down the street. Let's demand justice. He kind of looked at me. He kind of laughed at me. He said, no, Steph. He goes, there's no point because we don't have a voice. We don't. It doesn't matter. I immediately felt a sense of urgency that these voices needed to be heard, and I also understood that the voices would be so much stronger if we unified them and they were amplified. Around this time, I had connected with some of my other friends, local musicians and advocates, activists, and we started to do these cooling stations where we'd put up these pop-up tents, bring folding chairs, music, instruments, food, ice water, and get to know our unsheltered neighbors. At the end of one of those long days, I met a woman who was unsheltered, and she got excited seeing that we played music, and she was like, oh, Google my name, look me up. I said, okay, so I Googled her name, and there she was in this article singing with the choir in Chicago. I thought, wow, what a concept. And then I started to wonder about all the voices I had met and how these voices would feel singing together. Right around this time is one of these kind of moments where you're like, you remember everything, like the smell in the air, like the grass you were standing on, like everything going on. It was this electric moment. I was introduced to a pastor downtown, Pastor Chris Nafis. Chris was doing the same work in the same community, and we built a trust and a rapport with each other right away. He said, Steph, I like what you're doing here. If you want, you can use our church for anything. And I said, really? Because I haven't been to church in a long time. So I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, you can come into the church. Use it for whatever you want. It's totally free for you to use. I said, because I want to start a choir. This is 3 hours after I met this woman, you know? The voice, sometimes those moments, it's like, oh, boom, oh, here's the next part, boom, here's the next part, boom. So it was like that. It was electric. And I thought, wow, if we can use your space, I'd really like to come and gather people and have a choir there. He said, okay. So then right after that, I called a friend I had just met. Her name is Nina Deering. She was a friend of mine in the music community, led with her heart, had joined me in outreach. I said, Nina, do you want to start a choir for people living on the street? She responded right away, yes. And so the beginning of the Voices of Our City Choir took flight. Now you might be wondering, how do you start a choir for people that are living on the street? People living on the street are suffering greatly. If you live on the street for 1 week, you're suffering PTSD. You're attacked at night, things are taken from you, you're criminalized by your city. It's really hard to find stability in this community. So we decided that if we were going to have a really good go of this, we needed to have choir practice every Friday. So now let me bring you into the church. So you probably have an idea of what a church looks like. This is not your typical church. This was a warehouse downtown with concrete floors, metal walls, and a tin roof. We had about 50 folding chairs, some outlets to plug our instruments in, our amps in, and we would meet there. We'd invite people in. We'd have some coffee, some food. People would come in to charge their phones, use the restroom, but mostly they stayed for the music. Pretty soon you could hear our voices coming down the street. Sometimes the police would even come in and stick their head in like this, like, what is going on down here? We would do songs that the choir remembered, songs of hope and love, soul music, right? Like Marvin Gaye, Mother, Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. Imagine the beauty of an unsheltered person struggling to survive singing those lyrics. We started to gain some attention. People started to come and hear this choir. And I was getting ready for my annual concert with my band, with the Grammy Award-winning producer, my guitar player from Earth, Wind & Fire, a horn section. That's a great band. We had our annual concert planned, and the interviewer asked me, are you going to have the choir perform? And I was like, shoot, I never thought of that. So then I went to choir practice, and I said, do you guys want to do a gig with me and my band? And they were like, yeah. So the next thing I know, we're in a venue. We have an incredible turnout, about this size. About 350 people came to hear our first concert. I start the show, we're doing our thing, we're grooving. About 20 minutes in, I invite the choir up. I've been playing music for about 20 years, and when I tell this story, it kind of brings tears to my eyes because something happened that day, that night, that was something I'd never experienced before. As the choir walks up to the stage, the energy from the audience was like super visceral, like really in the moment, really ready to hear the choir. And we sang our first song, and the whole room, after we finished, stood up on their feet, clapping and cheering for the choir. It was so beautiful. And the choir was like this, like almost like. But then this thing happened where the choir realized that they were clapping for them, and a whole energy exchange happened from the audience, appreciating them, loving them, and hearing them. Now I might really cry. What's happened since this moment is a total miracle. We have grown from a one-person choir to a nonprofit organization with 200 people in a choir. Yeah, thank you. We've become an in-demand performance ensemble with up to 3 gigs in a week. We're doing a record in collaboration with the San Diego Symphony. And probably the most beautiful thing of us coming together right now, I'd say, is that in 2.5 years, we have helped 39 of our choir members get off the street and into housing and/or safe shelter. Yeah. Thank you. I spent a lot of my life wondering, what's this thing that I can't describe? What's this thing in the air that I can feel, but I can't explain it? I wonder what my purpose was. I wonder what your purpose was, right? If we're here, then what is this all about? So I decided to challenge myself and do the things that made me feel alive. I left a 12-year banking career, not baking, but banking, behind a desk, to pursue my music. I taught myself singing and songwriting and guitar playing. I even taught myself how to swim in the open ocean, up to 4 miles at a time with dolphins and sharks. And I, along with some incredible people, started a choir for people experiencing homelessness. We are changing the lives of our unsheltered neighbors through music, and the Voices of our City Choir serves as a platform to help those who have been homeless, past and present. We are changing lives. So for me, it's really about maybe doing those hard things like swimming with some sharks, or starting a choir, or being available to the girl in your coffee shop who has a question. Or it could be as simple as looking somebody in the eye that you meet on the street that's a stranger, smiling and saying hello. So I'm inviting all of you to live with your full intention so that you may experience the power of being connected to everyone and everything. Thank you.